The strange thing about revenge is that it doesn't feel how you expect it to. I thought it would taste sweet, like honeyed wine on my tongue. Instead, it sat heavy in my stomach, substantial and permanent, like the foundation of a house finally built on solid ground. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Eliza Morgan, and I was once invisible. Not in the fantastical sense, of course, but in the way that truly matters. I was unseen despite standing in plain sight. Unacknowledged despite my voice ringing clear. Forgotten despite the imprint of my hands on everything I touched. This is the story of how I disappeared, and how I made myself impossible to ignore. 7 years ago, I was 31 and thriving. As a senior financial analyst at Mercer and Holt, I had built a reputation for transforming struggling portfolios into gold mines. My colleagues respected me. My bosses promoted me. My future gleamed with promise. Then I met Julian Wade. He wasn't like the investment bankers and hedge fund managers I usually encountered, men in expensive suits with sharper elbows than mine. Julian was different. He wore jeans to our first meeting, along with a faded T-shirt that read "Dreamers Do." His hair was perpetually tousled, and his eyes sparkled when he talked about his vision. The problem with supply chain management is that it's stuck in the last century, he explained over coffee. We'd been introduced by a mutual acquaintance who thought I might be able to help with his business plan. Companies are still using Excel sheets and manual inventory. It's inefficient, prone to error, and completely unnecessary. I'll admit it, I was captivated, not just by his golden brown eyes or the dimple that appeared when he smiled, but by his passion, his certainty, the way he saw problems as puzzles waiting to be solved. That's where Inventory Pro comes in, he continued, sliding his laptop toward me. My software uses predictive analytics to automate supply ordering. It integrates with existing systems, learns from patterns, and eliminates waste. No more overstock, no more unexpected shortages. I studied his business plan with professional interest, but I couldn't ignore the flutter in my chest when our hands brushed. By our third meeting, the flutter had become a storm. By our fifth, we were lovers. 6 months later, we were married. To new beginnings, Julian toasted at our intimate reception. His mother, Vivian, watched with thinly veiled disapproval from the corner of the room. She had made it clear from our first meeting that I wasn't the woman she'd envisioned for her son. My son is special, she'd informed me during our first dinner together. He needs someone who understands that his work comes first. I'd smiled and squeezed Julian's hand under the table. I understand ambition better than most. What I didn't understand then was that Vivian wasn't warning me, she was stating expectations. Julian's work would always come first. My role was to accommodate, to adjust, to make space for greatness without expecting recognition. But on our wedding day, such concerns seemed distant. Julian's eyes were on me, not his mother. His vows promised partnership, respect, adventure, and I believed him. Our honeymoon in Lyon was a dream. Cobblestone streets, riverside walks, wine that tasted of sunshine and soil. On our last night, lying in a tangle of sheets with the scent of lavender drifting through open windows, Julian shared his fears. "What if it doesn't work?" he whispered into the darkness. "What if Inventory Pro fails and I've wasted years of my life?" I propped myself up on one elbow, studying the worry lines across his forehead. "Then you'll start again. We'll start again." "Wait." Of course. I traced the outline of his jaw with my fingertip. "Your dreams are my dreams now." Something shifted in his expression, relief, love, and something else I couldn't quite identify. "I don't deserve you." In retrospect, it was the truest thing he ever said to me. The following morning, while Julian showered, I drafted a document on hotel stationery. It wasn't particularly romantic, but it felt right, a tangible symbol of our partnership. A prenuptial agreement documenting that I would own 49% of Inventory Pro and any subsequent businesses developed by Julian with my financial or professional support. When he emerged from the bathroom, I showed him the paper. "What's this?" he asked, water still beating on his shoulders. "Just a little insurance policy," I said lightly. "For both of us, it makes it official that we're in this together." He laughed and signed without reading it closely. "As if we need a contract." He kissed me deeply, then added against my lips, "But if it makes you happy, it's done." I signed too, then called the front desk for a notary, a service the hotel was happy to provide for its American guests. The notary arrived promptly, verified our identities, and stamped the document. I tucked it into my luggage between the pages of my journal. Little did I know that those few minutes of forethought would eventually save me from complete devastation. The first year of marriage was blissful chaos. Julian worked tirelessly on Inventory Pro, refining the algorithms, meeting with potential investors, and building his team. I supported him with my salary, financial expertise, and networks. My role at Mercer and Holt gave me access to people who could help Julian's dream take flight, and I leveraged every connection. "You're my secret weapon," Julian would say, pulling me into his lap after successful meetings. I began spending my evenings and weekends helping him refine his pitch decks, financial projections, and business strategy. My boss noticed my divided attention. "You're one of our best, Eliza," he said during my annual review. "But lately, it seems like your heart's elsewhere." He wasn't wrong. I believed in Julian's vision with every fiber of my being. I could see the potential of Inventory Pro, not just as a successful business, but as a revolutionary tool. And I wanted to be part of that revolution. So when Julian asked if I would consider leaving Mercer and Holt to work on Inventory Pro full-time, the decision wasn't as difficult as it should have been. "We can't pay you what you're worth yet," he admitted. "But once we secure the Series A funding, you'll be the first one properly compensated." I resigned the following week, cashing out my $401K to invest in Julian's, our company. My colleagues threw a goodbye party, complete with a cake shaped like a calculator. My boss pulled me aside during the celebration. "Are you sure about this, Eliza? You're on track for partnership here." I nodded, confidence unwavering. "Sometimes you have to risk everything for something you believe in." He smiled sadly. "Just make sure your name is on the incorporation documents. I've seen too many talented women disappear into their husbands' shadows." I laughed off his concern. Julian and I were different. We were partners in every sense of the word. The irony isn't lost on me. For the next 2 years, I threw myself into building Inventory Pro. I managed our dwindling finances, refined the business model, and crafted investor presentations. I worked alongside Julian for 18-hour days, subsisting on takeout and determination. When we couldn't afford office space, our apartment became company headquarters. When we needed new equipment, I sold my grandmother's pearls. When morale flagged, I was the cheerleader, the therapist, the steadying hand. Slowly, painfully, Inventory Pro gained traction. Julian rebranded it as Restock Solutions based on market research I'd conducted. A small seed round allowed us to hire 3 developers and a marketing consultant. A successful pilot program with a regional grocery chain opened doors to larger opportunities. And then came the pivotal meeting with Horizon Ventures. "This is it," Julian said as we prepared that morning. He looked sharp in the new suit I'd insisted on buying, even though it strained our budget. "If they invest, we're on our way." I straightened his tie and kissed him quickly. They'd be fools not to. The meeting went brilliantly. Julian was charismatic and knowledgeable. The investors were engaged and enthusiastic. By the end of the day, we had a verbal commitment for $2.5 million in Series A funding. That night, we celebrated with champagne. We couldn't afford in our apartment that desperately needed repairs. "To Restock Solutions," Julian toasted, eyes bright with triumph. "To us," I corrected, clinking my glass against his. He smiled, but something had changed. There was a new distance in his eyes, as if he were already looking beyond me, toward a future I couldn't quite see. The shift was subtle at first. Julian began holding meetings I wasn't invited to. He hired an executive assistant named Rebecca without consulting me. He moved into a proper office while I continued working from home to save on overhead. "We need to project the right image now," he explained when I questioned these changes. "Investors expect a certain level of professionalism." "And I'm not professional?" I asked, hurt evident in my voice. He sighed as if I were being difficult. "That's not what I'm saying, but you know how these tech bros are. They respond better to traditional structures." I should have pressed harder. I should have insisted on formal recognition of my role. Instead, I told myself this was temporary, a necessary compromise on the path to our shared success. The Series A funding transformed Restock Solutions. Julian expanded the team, secured larger clients, and began appearing in industry publications. I continued working behind the scenes, managing finances, refining strategies, and supporting my husband's increasingly demanding schedule. When the company website was redesigned, I noticed that my name was missing from the Our Team page. "It must be an oversight," Julian said dismissively when I mentioned it. "I'll have Rebecca fix it." She never did. At Restock Solutions' first holiday party, I overheard a new employee ask Rebecca who I was. "That's Julian's wife," she answered, her tone suggesting this was my only identity worth mentioning. Later that night, Julian gave a speech thanking everyone for their contributions to the company's success. He named the developers, the sales team, the investors. He even thanked his mother for her unwavering belief. My name never left his lips. In bed that night, I turned to him. "Why didn't you mention me in your speech?" He looked genuinely confused. "What?" "You thanked everyone except me. I've been with you from the beginning. I cashed out my retirement fund. I left my career." Julian reached for my hand. "Baby, everyone knows you're important to me. I don't need to say it publicly." "But you should want to," I whispered. He fell asleep easily. I stared at the ceiling until dawn. As Restock Solutions grew, I shrank. My suggestions in meetings were overlooked, then repeated by Julian to acclaim minutes later. My financial reports were questioned, then verified by outside consultants at considerable expense. My role became increasingly administrative rather than strategic. When I raised concerns, Julian accused me of jealousy. "Can't you just be happy for me?" he asked after one particularly heated argument. "For us, this is what we wanted." "This isn't what I wanted," I replied, gesturing to the growing distance between us. "I wanted partnership." He softened then, pulling me into his arms. "You're right. I've been caught up in all this. Let me make it up to you." For a while, things improved. Julian made efforts to include me in important discussions and acknowledge my contributions. But as Restock Solutions secured its Series B funding and Julian's public profile rose, old patterns reemerged. The final blow came during a profile in Tech Innovator magazine. The article, titled "The Solitary Genius Behind Restock Solutions," detailed Julian's journey from concept to successful startup. It described his singular vision and lone wolf mentality. It praised his self-made success story. There was no mention of me. When I confronted him, Julian seemed genuinely perplexed by my hurt. "It's just how these stories work," he explained. "They need a hero narrative. No one wants to read about a team effort." "But it was a team effort," I insisted. "I was there, I am here." He kissed my forehead patronizingly. "Of course you are, but this is business, Eliza, it's not personal." Except it was deeply, painfully personal. That night, I listened to Julian's even breathing beside me and realized with startling clarity. I had disappeared. Not suddenly, but gradually, eroded like a coastline, one wave at a time, until the original shape was unrecognizable. The worst part, I had helped dig my own grave. Every time I'd stepped back to let Julian shine, every time I'd swallowed my hurt, every time I'd accepted less than I deserved, I'd handed him the shovel. I lay awake wondering if it was too late to resurrect myself. The answer came sooner than expected. 6 months later, I was organizing Julian's home office when I found receipts from Hotel Bellamy, an upscale boutique hotel downtown. 5 separate stays in the past 3 months. We hadn't stayed there together. I wish I could say I was surprised, but the truth is I had suspected something for weeks. The late nights, the weekend emergencies. The way Julian's phone always landed screen down, the growing emotional chasm between us. Still, suspicion is different from confirmation. My hands trembled as I searched his credit card statements and found more hotels, restaurant charges for 2 at places we'd never visited together, a jewelry purchase from Tiffany's on a day he'd claimed to be in meetings. That evening I waited until he came home. He looked tired but satisfied, his tie already loosened, his hair slightly rumpled. "We need to talk," I said from my seat at the kitchen table. He sighed, dropping his keys on the counter. "Can it wait? I'm exhausted." No, my voice was stronger than I'd expected. "It can't." Julian must have heard something new in my tone, because he sat down across from me without further protest. I slid the receipts toward him. "Would you like to explain these?" His face went blank, then cycled through expressions: surprise, anger, calculation, and finally resignation. "It's not what you think," he began, then stopped himself. "No, that's not true. It probably is what you think." "Rebecca?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "How long does it matter?" "It matters to me." Julian ran a hand through his hair. "About 8 months." 8 months? While I had been working to support his company, maintain our home, and salvage our marriage, he had been building a life with someone else. "I was going to tell you," he offered weakly. "When, after the Series C funding, after you took the company public, when exactly were you planning to inform me that our marriage was over?" "It's complicated, Eliza. Rebecca understands the demands of my position. She's there at the office. She sees what I'm building." "I'm there too," I said quietly. "I've always been there, you just stopped seeing me." He had the audacity to look annoyed. "This isn't productive. Yes, I've been seeing Rebecca. Yes, I should have told you sooner, but maybe this is for the best. We've been growing apart for years." The calm detachment in his voice ignited something in me. "Growing apart? You pushed me away, Julian. You took everything I offered, my career, my savings, my expertise, my love, and you treated it as your due. You erased me from your success story because it was more convenient than acknowledging you didn't do this alone." "That's not fair," he protested, but his eyes shifted away. He knew I was right. "I want a divorce," I said, surprising myself with the finality in my voice. Julian's relief was palpable. "I think that's wise." We negotiated the initial separation with painful civility. Julian moved into a luxury apartment downtown while I remained in our modest home. He provided a small stipend for living expenses, significantly less than what I'd need to maintain our lifestyle, but enough to keep me from immediate financial ruin. What he didn't know was that I had begun documenting everything, every contribution I'd made to Ristock Solutions, every financial investment, every strategic decision. I collected emails, meeting notes, early design documents with my feedback. I created a timeline of the company's growth parallel to my own increasing invisibility. And I remembered the prenuptial agreement, still tucked in my journal from Lyon. I retrieved it and confirmed that the notary's stamp was still clearly visible. Then I contacted Audrey Kim, a lawyer recommended by my former boss at Mercer and Holt. "This is very interesting," Audrey said during our first consultation, examining the prenup. "It's unconventional, but the intent is clear. You're entitled to 49% ownership of Restock Solutions." "Julian will fight it," I warned. "He'll say it was a joke or that he didn't understand what he was signing." Audrey's smile was sharp. "Let him try. This document, combined with your evidence of contribution, makes a compelling case. He may have written you out of the company narrative, but he can't rewrite legal ownership that easily." For the first time in years, I felt something akin to hope. The divorce proceedings began 2 months later. Julian hired Preston Wheeler, a high-profile attorney known for aggressive tactics in high-asset divorces. Vivian sat behind them in the courtroom, her expression suggesting she'd smelled something unpleasant. "My client acknowledges the marriage has irretrievably broken down," Preston stated during the initial hearing. "He is prepared to offer a generous settlement of $250,000, which represents significant goodwill given the short duration of the marriage and Mrs. Wade's limited contributions to the marital assets." I felt Audrey stiffen beside me. "Limited contributions?" she repeated. "Mrs. Wade left a lucrative career to support her husband's business. She invested her retirement savings. She worked without salary for years. She played the role of supportive wife," Preston interrupted. "Which many spouses do. That doesn't entitle her to a technology company she had no hand in creating." Julian nodded in agreement, not even looking in my direction. "Your Honor," Audrey continued, "we contest this characterization completely. Mrs. Wade was instrumental in the formation, growth, and success of Restock Solutions. She was, in effect, an unmarried partner who—" "Oh, please," Julian interrupted, unable to contain himself. "Eliza handled some paperwork. She helped with a few presentations. She was a glorified assistant at best." The judge frowned at this outburst, but allowed Julian to continue. "I built Restock Solutions," he said, turning slightly to ensure the entire courtroom could hear him. "I wrote the code. I pitched the investors. I closed the deals. Yes, Eliza was supportive, and I'm grateful for that. But let's not pretend she was anything more than a cheerleader." My blood turned to ice. Years of invisibility, of diminishment, crystallized in that moment. Julian truly believed his version of events, a narrative where his success was entirely self-made, where my contributions were negligible, where I was a footnote rather than a co-author. Across the courtroom, Vivian nodded approvingly at her son's speech. Rebecca sat further back, her expression carefully neutral but her posture triumphant. "Your Honor," Audrey said calmly, "we would like to submit an additional document for consideration." She handed copies to the judge, to Preston, and finally to Julian. I watched as he glanced at the paper, his expression transitioning from indifference to confusion to barely controlled panic. "This is a prenuptial agreement executed in Lyon, France, 7 years ago," Audrey explained. "It clearly states that Mrs. Wade is entitled to 49% ownership of Inventory Pro, now known as Restock Solutions, as well as any subsequent businesses developed with her support." Julian leapt to his feet. "This is fraud. I never signed this." "The document bears your signature, Mr. Wade, authenticated by a notary public," the judge observed. "Did you or did you not sign this agreement?" Julian's face flushed. I may have signed something, but I didn't understand what it was. Eliza tricked me. It was our honeymoon. I was distracted." I almost laughed at his desperate backpedaling. The man who prided himself on his business acumen was now claiming he'd signed a legal document without reading it. "Your Honor," Preston interjected, "even if Mr. Wade did sign this document, it was clearly obtained under duress or through misrepresentation. Furthermore, it was never filed with any court, and Mrs. Wade conveniently produces it only now, when it serves her financial interests." "There was no requirement to file it," Audrey countered. "And as for misrepresentation, Mrs. Wade has extensive documentation proving her substantial contributions to Restock Solutions, consistent with the partnership outlined in this agreement." The judge studied the prenup carefully. "This appears to be properly executed, though its timing and circumstances are unusual. I'll need to review this document along with Mrs. Wade's evidence of contribution before making any determinations on asset division." Julian leaned urgently toward Preston, their whispered conversation intense and agitated. Vivian's face had gone from smug to stricken. As the hearing adjourned, Julian caught up with me in the hallway, his earlier composure completely abandoned. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, grabbing my arm. I pulled away from his grip, proving that I exist. "Do you have any idea what this could do to the company? To me? We're preparing for Series C funding. This could tank everything." "You should have thought of that before you erased me," I replied. "Before you cheated, before you sat in that courtroom and called me a glorified assistant." His eyes narrowed. "I'll fight this with everything I have. No one will believe you were an equal partner." "They don't need to believe it," I said calmly. "They just need to read the prenup you signed." Julian's face darkened. "This isn't over, Eliza." For once, we agreed on something. The weeks that followed were a storm of legal maneuvers. Julian's team filed motions to dismiss the prenuptial agreement, claiming variously that it was invalidly executed, obtained through fraud, or superseded by verbal agreements. Audrey countered each motion with methodical precision, presenting my meticulous documentation of contributions to Restock Solutions. Meanwhile, I took a job as a server at Celia's diner to make ends meet. The stipend Julian provided barely covered rent, and my savings were depleted by legal fees. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years as a financial analyst and startup executive, I was balancing plates and memorizing specials. One Tuesday afternoon, Vivian came into the diner. I knew immediately that her presence wasn't coincidental. She sat in my section, ordered a black coffee, and waited until I approached. "This is quite a fall from grace," she observed, looking around the modest establishment with thinly veiled disdain. I maintained my professional smile. "Can I get you anything else, Vivian?" "You can drop this ridiculous lawsuit and accept Julian's settlement offer." She stirred her coffee unnecessarily. "This prenup nonsense may delay things, but it won't change the outcome. Julian will win. He always does." "Is that what you came here to tell me?" Vivian leaned forward. "I came to offer you a better deal. $500,000 paid immediately, double what Julian initially proposed. But you sign an NDA and walk away completely." I considered her offer not because I was tempted, but because I wanted to understand the desperation behind it. "You're worried," I realized aloud. "The prenup is valid and you know it." Something flickered in her eyes. "Julian built that company from nothing." "We built it together," I corrected. "I was there for every late night, every setback, every breakthrough. I wrote the business plan that secured your son's first investors. I managed the finances that kept the lights on while he perfected his algorithms. And now you want to destroy everything because your feelings are hurt." Vivian's voice was sharp with contempt. "Because he found someone better suited to his current position." The casual cruelty of her assessment stung, but I refused to show it. "I want what I earned, Vivian, what's legally mine, and what Julian explicitly agreed to give me when he signed that prenup." She stood abruptly, leaving her coffee untouched. "You'll regret this." I watched her leave, her rigid posture betraying her anger. Only then did I allow myself a small smile. Vivian wouldn't have made the offer if they weren't worried. Julian's team must have determined the prenup would likely hold up in court. For the first time, I began to believe I might win. 3 days later, I received a call from Audrey. "They want to schedule an emergency settlement conference," she informed me. "Tomorrow morning." "Why the rush?" "Apparently, news of your lawsuit is starting to circulate in tech investment circles. With the Series C funding round approaching, Julian is desperate to resolve this quickly and quietly." I considered this development. "What's their offer?" "They've proposed $1.2 million with a comprehensive NDA. The amount was substantial, life-changing, even, more than I could earn in many years at the diner. But it was a fraction of what my 49% stake in Restock Solutions was worth. Restock was valued at $85 million during the last funding round," I said. "My share would be worth over $40 million. And that's without accounting for potential growth from the Series C round," Audrey agreed. "But litigation is never certain, Eliza. If we reject this offer, they'll escalate their attacks. It could get ugly." I thought of Julian in the courtroom, dismissing years of my life as insignificant. I thought of Vivian's contempt at the diner. I thought of my name, deliberately omitted from every public narrative of Restock's success. "I'm not afraid of ugly," I told Audrey. "Reject the offer." The settlement conference was brief and tense. Julian appeared shocked when his substantially increased offer was declined. His lawyer presented various scenarios in which the prenup might be invalidated. Audrey calmly countered each argument. As we were preparing to leave, Julian approached me directly. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "I'm offering you enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life." "But it's not my share," I replied. "It's not recognition of what I built alongside you." He shook his head, frustration evident. "You're willing to risk getting nothing just to prove a point." "It's not a point, Julian, it's the truth. And yes, I'm willing to risk everything for it." The judge's ruling came 3 weeks later. Despite Julian's best efforts to discredit the prenuptial agreement, the court found it valid and enforceable. The language was clear. I owned 49% of Restock Solutions. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Harmon delivered her decision. "Based on the evidence presented, this court finds that Mrs. Morgan made substantial contributions to the formation, development, and success of Restock Solutions," she stated. "These contributions are consistent with the partnership described in the prenuptial agreement executed in Lyon. Therefore, Mrs. Morgan is entitled to 49% ownership of Restock Solutions, as stipulated in that agreement." Julian's face drained of color. Preston immediately began whispering about appeals and alternative strategies. Vivian appeared physically ill. But I felt nothing but a profound sense of vindication. Not joy, not triumph, but the simple relief of being seen, of having my reality acknowledged. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, alerted to the high-stakes tech divorce. Julian pushed past them without comment, but I stopped briefly as microphones were thrust toward me. "Mrs. Wade, how does it feel to become a multi-millionaire overnight?" one reporter called out. I corrected him gently. "My name is Eliza Morgan, and I didn't become anything overnight. I worked for years to build Restock Solutions alongside my ex-husband. Today, the court simply recognized that truth." The headlines the next day varied from sensational, "Tech Wife's Revenge," Hidden prenup scores half of $85 M company. To more measured, court awards ex-wife 49% of Restock Solutions based on previously undisclosed agreement. Tech industry publications scrambled to rewrite the company's origin story, suddenly discovering my contributions that had been overlooked for years. Julian was forced to postpone the Series C funding round as investors expressed concerns about the ownership dispute. Restock's board called an emergency meeting to address the situation. I was invited as a major shareholder. Walking into Restock's sleek headquarters as an owner rather than a visitor was surreal. Employees stared as I made my way to the conference room, whispers following in my wake. Rebecca was conspicuously absent. The board meeting was predictably tense. Julian sat at the head of the table, looking exhausted and defeated. The other board members, two venture capitalists, the CFO, and the lead developer, watched me warily as I took my seat. "Let's address the elephant in the room," said Michael Chen, one of the VCs. "This ownership dispute has created significant uncertainty for our investors. We need to resolve it quickly to proceed with the Series C round." "There's no dispute," I said calmly. "The court has ruled I own 49% of Restock Solutions." "Which puts us in an untenable position," Julian interjected. "How can we function with this arrangement?" I looked directly at him. The same way countless other companies function with co-founders who no longer get along, professionally. The CFO cleared his throat. "With respect, Mrs. Wade." "Morgan," I corrected. "I've resumed my maiden name." "Ms. Morgan," he amended. "Your sudden involvement complicates our governance structure. You have no operational role in the company." "That can change," I replied. "I helped build Restock's financial systems and client relationships. I've been absent because I was deliberately excluded, not because I lacked the capacity to contribute." Julian laughed bitterly. "So that's your game? You want a C-suite position now?" "No," I said, surprising everyone, including myself. "I want recognition of my contributions and fair compensation for my ownership stake, but I don't want to work with you again, Julian." The relief on his face was almost comical. "Then what do you propose?" asked Chen. "A buyout," I said simply. "At fair market value, accounting for the projected growth from Series C funding." The ensuing negotiations were exhaustive. Ultimately, we reached an agreement. Restock would buy my shares for $52 million, paid in installments over 5 years, with the first payment of $15 million due immediately. I would retain consulting rights to ensure the financial terms were met, but would have no operational role in the company. As I signed the final agreement, Julian watched me with a mixture of resentment and something like respect. "You could have destroyed the company," he said quietly when the others had left. "Why didn't you?" "Because unlike you, I care about what we built together." I gathered my papers, ready to leave this chapter of my life behind. "And because revenge isn't about destruction, Julian, it's about restoration." He frowned. "Restoration of what?" "Balance, truth, my visibility in a story you tried to write me out of." Julian nodded slowly. "I underestimated you, I always did." "Yes," I agreed, "that was your biggest mistake." 1 year later, I launched Morgan Financial Strategies, a consulting firm specializing in startup financial planning and investor relations. My first clients were women entrepreneurs who had reached out after reading about my case, seeking both financial guidance and strategies for maintaining equity in their ventures. The firm grew quickly, earning a reputation for thorough work and transparent practices. I hired a team of analysts, many of them women returning to the workforce after career interruptions. Our tagline, "Building Visible Success," was both a promise to clients and a personal manifesto. 18 months after the court ruling, Forbes featured me in an article titled "The Partner Who Refused to Disappear." The piece detailed both my legal battle and my subsequent business success. The photographer captured me at my office desk, the Lion prenuptial agreement framed on the wall behind me, a reminder of both my near erasure and my resurrection. Julian and Rebecca married shortly after our divorce was finalized. Restock Solutions eventually completed its Series C funding, though at a lower valuation than initially projected. Julian remained CEO, but investor confidence had been shaken by the ownership revelation and subsequent buyout. As for Vivian, I ran into her at a charity gala 6 months after the settlement. "You got what you wanted," she said by way of greeting, her tone suggesting I'd committed a great theft rather than claimed what was legally mine. I got what I earned, I corrected. She studied me for a long moment. I suppose you did. It wasn't an apology, but from Vivian, it was as close to an acknowledgement as I was likely to get. The strange thing about revenge is that it doesn't feel how you expect it to. I thought it would taste sweet, like honeyed wine on my tongue. Instead, it sat heavy in my stomach, substantial and permanent, like the foundation of a house finally built on solid ground. Revenge didn't heal the wounds of betrayal or erase the years of invisibility, but it did something perhaps more valuable. It